I had been back in the fortress for 3 days before he looked at me, and even then he did not see me. I was carrying a tray. That was the first thing I had to learn again, after the glamour took. How to hold a tray with a baby on my hip and not let the ale slosh, and not let the baby fuss, and not let my voice slip when one of the warriors at the lower table asked me where I was from. "The Hollows," I told them. "North Road. My husband died in the winter sickness." They did not press. Widows with babies were common enough in the lower hall, and the glamour had made me plain in a way that even I did not recognise when I caught my reflection in the kettles. Dark hair turned dun. The line of my jaw softened. The green of my eyes muddied to brown. I looked like nothing. I looked like a woman a king would walk past 100 times without noting. That had been the bargain. I had taken it. I had chosen this. The salt of the glamour on my tongue, the weight of my son slung against my ribs, the long road back to the fortress that had been my home, and was now a place I had to enter through the kitchens. I had chosen it because the alternative was Astrid Voss putting another goblet to my mouth, and this time finishing the work. I was 22 years old, by pack reckoning a woman grown twice over, and I had been the Alpha King's mate for 1 summer. He had not recognised me yet. He did, on the 3rd night, finally look up from his cup when I passed his table. A flick of the eyes, dark and surface deep, and his wolf made a sound under his breath that he did not seem to know he had made. A small, low sound. Not a growl, something nearer to a held breath. I kept walking. I did not turn around. Behind me, the great hall went on with its noise, the warriors arguing, the hounds working at bones under the long tables, the fire crackling in the open hearth, and the Alpha King of the Iron Territories sat on his wolf throne and did not look up again. But he had heard me. His wolf had. I went to the alcove behind the wine racks and stood with my back to the stones and breathed until the shake in my hands went still. My son made a soft noise against my collarbone, and I shifted him without looking, the way I had been doing for 9 months now, without looking because my hands had memorised him before my eyes had stopped being afraid. His name was Bran. I had named him in the cottage at the edge of the hollows, by myself, with no witness and no Luna's silver bowl. He had Roderick's gold eyes. The glamour had not been able to touch that, because the glamour was bound to me, not to him. And so my son walked through the lower hall of his father's court with the eyes of the wolf throne, and no one had thought to look. I had counted on that. I had also counted on something else. I had counted on my voice. The witch in the hollow had warned me. "Everything else can be hidden," she had said. "But a man who has loved a woman knows her voice the way a wolf knows his own name. If you speak in his hearing, the glamour will hold only until his wolf decides it will not." So I did not speak in his hearing. For 3 days I did not. On the 4th day, the boy slipped in the upper corridor, and the tray went, and I caught it with one hand, and Bran with the other, and said, low and without thinking, "Easy, love." Not to the Alpha King, to my son. But the corridor carried, and the Alpha King was on the other side of the wall in the council chamber, with the door propped open for the wind, and I heard the scrape of a chair so violent that one of the council startled and asked his pardon. And I knew, then, with the cold certainty of a woman who has been waiting for a wolf to find her, that I had 3 minutes at most before he came into the corridor. I did not run. I picked up the cups, I straightened my apron, I shifted Bran higher on my hip, and I walked, calmly, toward the kitchen stair. I did not make it to the stair. He came out of the council chamber, with his shoulders set wrong, and his hands in fists, and his eyes, gold eyes, the same as my son's, which my son did not yet have the wit to understand mattered, moving over the corridor with a hunger so naked I almost looked away out of pity. Then he saw me. He saw a kitchen woman with a child, and his face did the thing his face had been doing for 9 months, the thing I had heard whispered about from every corner of the lower hall, the small contraction at the temple, the half a breath taken and abandoned, the eyes going dead again. He turned to walk past me. His wolf did not. His wolf stopped 3 paces from me and went still in a way I have never seen a wolf go still. Not threat still, not hunt still, listening still, waiting still, the way a dog waits at a door for a step he knows. The Alpha King stopped also, because his wolf had stopped, and his eyes came back to me, confused. "Have we met?" he said. His voice was rougher than I remembered. He had not slept enough, for 9 months by the look of him. "No, my lord," I said. I kept it light. I kept it hollow-accented. I kept my eyes on the stones of the floor, because the witch had warned me about eye contact too, and because I did not trust my own face. He did not move. His wolf did not move. "Your name," he said. "Mira, my lord," I said. It was close enough to my own name that I would answer to it without flinching, and far enough that it would not catch in his ear. "Of the hollow, kitchen." "Mira." He said it the way a man says a word he is testing for fit. I felt it in my throat. I felt his wolf, somewhere under the surface of him, lift its head. "My lord," I said, "the tray." I lifted the tray slightly, a small gesture, a working woman's apology for occupying a king's corridor. He stepped aside. He did not stop watching me as I passed, and his wolf walked the length of the corridor at his heel and did not look away from me. And at the turn of the stair I heard him say, almost to himself, almost to no one, "That child has my eyes." And then, after a pause that lasted longer than any pause in my life, "Many wolves have those eyes." He said it as if he were correcting himself, as if he had said something foolish in front of a council he respected. The voice was steady. The hand on the rail of the corridor was not. I went down the kitchen stair with Bran on my hip, and I did not look back. And when I reached the second turning where the wall hides the corridor above, I sat down on the cold stone, and I put my forehead against my son's hair, and I waited for the shake to leave my hands. It did not leave them for a long time. The thing I had not expected in all the planning was that he had built a chair for me. I learned it in the lower hall on the 5th night, when one of the older kitchen women told the story over the bread. The Alpha King, she said, had refused to take a new Luna in the 9 months since the old one died in childbed. The advisors had brought him 3 women of suitable houses, and he had turned them away without rising from his throne. And at the long table, where the Luna's seat ought to have been removed and the bench restored, the chair still stood. Carved high-back oak, the wolf and moon at its crest, set untouched beside the throne. He took his meals beside an empty chair every night. He spoke to it sometimes, the older woman said. Not in front of the court, but the page who served his wine had heard him, once, ask the empty chair a question about a council matter, and then sit listening as if he expected an answer. The kitchen woman crossed herself and said it was grief, and grief in an alpha was a kind of madness, and the pack was waiting for him to come back from it. I did not eat that night. I sat in the alcove with Bran asleep in my lap, and I did not eat, and I did not weep, because if I wept, the glamour would lift, and the witch had said, "Not until you are ready," and I was not ready yet. He thought I had died in childbed. I had known that. Astrid Voss had wanted me to know it, before she put the cup to my mouth. "They will tell him you and the child are both dead," she had said, "and the king will mourn, and the king will be more powerful for the mourning. And in a year, he will look at me and see a woman who has waited. You will live the rest of your life in the hollow, kitchen woman, and you will not say a word, because the moment you do, my brother in the council will come for the child." I had nodded. I had drunk what she gave me, which she had not known was not the cup she thought she was giving me, because the night cook had loved me, and the night cook had switched the bottles, and the next morning I had been on the road north, with my belly full of my son, and a glamour charm folded into the hem of my cloak. I had assumed he would grieve. I had not assumed he would build me a chair. I sat in the alcove and I looked at the wall and I thought, he is sitting at his table right now, talking to the place where I should be sitting. And I thought, very quietly, because thinking it any louder would have undone me, he loves me. I had not known. I had hoped. I had been his mate for one summer, and I had been 21 years old, and he had been a king who did not say things, and I had hoped, and I had not known. I knew now. I want to ask you something, if you have stayed with me this far. I want to ask you what you would have done. If you have ever loved someone who did not say it, and then you went away, and then you came back, and you found out, by accident, by kitchen gossip, that the silence had not been the absence of love, but the shape of it. Tell me in the comments. I'm still working it out. If her side of the story is the one you came here for, stay with me. What happens next is the part I'm still not sure I survived. I made a decision in the alcove that night. I made it without crying, because if I cried, the glamour would lift, and I was not ready yet for what came after the lifting. I decided I would speak to him. Not to reveal myself, not yet. The witch had said the glamour would hold only until his wolf decided otherwise, and his wolf had decided otherwise the moment I said, "Easy, love in the upper corridor." And so I had perhaps days, perhaps less, before he came looking for me with the question already half answered in his own throat. Before that happened, I needed to know one thing. I needed to know what he would do if he found me. I needed to know whether he would believe me, because I had no proof. Astrid Voss had been clever. The night cook was dead by now. Winter sickness, the same lie I had used about the husband I never had. The bottles were gone. The midwife who had taken Bran out of me in the hollow had no standing in this court. I had a child with the Alpha King's eyes, and a glamour the king's own witches would unravel, and a story that sounded, even to me, like the kind of story a kitchen woman with ambition might invent. If he looked at me when I told him, and his eyes went hard, I would lose Bran by sundown. So I needed to know him again first. The man, not the legend. The grief, not the throne. I needed to see him in a room where he did not know I was watching. I went to the library. It was the third bell after midnight, and the library was empty except for him. He was there because, of course he was there. The kitchen woman had told me 3 days ago that the king did not sleep, that he walked the library after the council retired and the candles guttered low, and that no one was permitted in the library after the third bell except the king. I went anyway. I left Bran asleep in the kitchen alcove with the night cook's daughter, who was not the night cook, but who had her grandmother's eyes and her grandmother's mouth, and who I had decided to trust on instinct, which was the only currency I had left. I went up the back stair barefoot. I went in the eastern door, which the librarians forgot to lock because they were old men and the king did not punish them for it. I went down the long aisle of histories, and I stopped at the second pillar, where the shelf met the alcove, and I stood in the shadow there, and I watched him. He was at his table at the far end, a single candle, a stack of parchment. He was writing. He was writing the way a man writes when he has been writing the same letter every night for 9 months and has stopped expecting anyone to read it. I stood in the shadow at the second pillar and I watched my husband write a letter to me. I could not see the words. I did not need to. I could see his hand. I could see the way he stopped, sometimes, and set the quill down very carefully and put his face into his palms, and then picked the quill up again and kept writing. I could see the stack at his elbow. It was high. It was many months high. I had thought I knew what I had come here for. I had been wrong. A long time passed. I do not know how long. The candle burned down a finger's length, and then another, and at some point he set the quill down and did not pick it up again. And he reached across the table and pulled the stack of letters toward him. And he did the thing I had not been ready to see. He read one. He read one aloud, very quietly, to no one. He read it in the voice a man uses when he believes a woman is listening, and he has decided to speak to her anyway, even though he knows she is not. I caught only fragments. The south wing is finished, the way you wanted. Bjorn brought his daughter to court, and she has your laugh. I cannot find a word for what the chair does to me every night, but I have stopped looking for the word. I stood in the shadow at the second pillar, and I bit the inside of my own cheek until I tasted iron, because if I made a sound, the glamour would shake, and I was not ready yet. He folded the letter. He set it on top of the stack. He put one hand flat over the stack as if to hold it down, and then he said, into the candlelight, into the empty room, into the place where his wolf knew I was. Mirror. He said it like a man who has just realised something he is not yet allowing himself to know. I did not breathe. He did not turn his head. He said, after a long moment, in the same quiet voice, I do not know why I said that name. He sat for a while longer. Then he stood. He took the stack of letters and he put them into the iron-banded chest at the end of the table, and he locked it with a key on a chain at his throat, and he walked out of the library through the western door without looking at the second pillar. He knew I was there. His wolf had known. He had let me go. The next day, Astrid Voss came down into the kitchens. She had never been in the kitchens. She came in the morning with 2 of her women in a riding cloak the colour of plum wine, and she stood in the doorway of the lower scullery, and she looked over the kitchen women the way a hawk looks over a field. I had bran on my hip. I had flour on my forearms. The glamour was holding, just, and I kept my eyes on the bowl I was kneading. You, she said. The new one. Hollow girl. I looked up. I did the bob a kitchen woman would do. My lady? Your child. She came across the kitchen. She did not look at me. She looked at Bran. She looked at Bran with the precise, calm attention of a woman counting coins, and her face did not change. And then her face did change. A single line at the corner of her mouth, and I knew, with the same cold certainty I had felt in the upper corridor, that Astrid Voss had recognised my son's eyes. How old is he? She said. 8 months, my lady. Where was he born? The Hollow, my lady, by the road. His father? Dead, my lady. Winter sickness. She held my eyes for the first time. Her face was very still. Hers was the face of a woman who was running, behind her eyes the same calculation I had run myself. Who is this woman? How did she come here? What does she know? How fast can I make this go away? You will bring the child to my chambers, she said, this evening, After the bell. I find I have an interest in him. A widow's son with good eyes is a useful thing in a court. I bobbed again. I did not answer. She turned at the door, and she said, over her shoulder, in a voice loud enough that the other kitchen women heard, "And bring the child himself, kitchen woman. Not a kitchen girl with the child. You." She left. The kitchen women did not look at me. I knew what would happen if I went to her chambers with Bran. I knew what would happen if I did not. I stood with my hands in the bread dough and I thought, very clearly, the time is now. You came here to choose the moment. The moment has chosen you. I lifted Bran out of the sling and I held him against my shoulder and I walked out of the kitchens with flour still on my arms. And I went up the back stair and I crossed the corridor where I had said, "Easy, love." And I went into the great hall through the side door the council used. And I walked the length of the great hall in front of the long tables and the warriors and the hounds and the hearth. And I stopped 6 paces from the wolf throne. The hall went quiet around me, like water going still. Roderick Vald looked up. He saw a kitchen woman with a child in her arms. He started to rise, to dismiss me, to have me removed, I do not know. And then his wolf saw me first. And his wolf came forward in him, the way a wolf comes forward when its mate walks into a room. And he sat back down very slowly. I lifted my chin. "My lord," I said. I said it in my own voice, not the hollow voice, mine. The glamour fought me. I had thought it would yield. I had thought it was a cloak I could let fall. It was not. It was rooted into the salt under my tongue, and the warding at my hairline, and the binding at my wrists. And it resisted. It pulled cold up through my bones, frost on the skin of my forearms where the flour was, my breath going to mist in a hall where the hearth was roaring 3 paces away. And I held my son tighter, and I said it again, louder, in my voice, the voice he had heard in his bed in the summer when I was 21 and not yet a mother, and not yet anyone's lie. "My lord, look at me." The frost went up my throat. I felt my hair give first, the dun draining out of it, the dark coming back in a slow line from the roots, and then the line of my jaw, and then my eyes, and Roderick Vald's hand on the arm of the wolf throne went white at the knuckles, and the warrior at the nearest table dropped his cup, and someone, somewhere down the hall, said a word that I think was a prayer. He did not speak. He stood. He came down off the dais in 3 strides and stopped 2 paces from me, the way his wolf had stopped in the corridor, and he looked at me, at my face, at my throat, at the child in my arms, with his own gold eyes blinking up at the firelight. And he made the sound he had made in the corridor on the 3rd night. The small, low, listening sound. And then he made another sound that was not a sound any king should make in front of his court. He went down. The Alpha King of the Iron Territories, in front of his council and his warriors and his hounds, and the empty chair beside the throne, went to his knees on the stones of the great hall. He did not reach for me. He did not reach for the child. He put one hand on the stones in front of him, and he bent his head, and he said, in a voice that had carried armies, in a voice rough as winter bark, in a voice loud enough that every wolf in the hall heard him. "Forgive me. I did not know." I had practiced what I would say. I had practiced it for 9 months. I had practiced it in the cottage in the hollow, and on the long road back, and in the kitchen alcove with Bran asleep on my chest. And I had a list. What Astrid Voss had done, what the physician had done, what the cup had been, who had switched the bottles, where the letters from the witch were, the name of the midwife, the date of my son's birth. and I opened my mouth to begin the list, and what came out instead was 3 words. I carried him. The Alpha King made the sound again. I carried your heir for 9 months, and you did not recognize my voice. I did not say it with anger. I did not have the room for anger. I said it the way you say a thing that has been sitting under your tongue for 9 months and finally has somewhere to go. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. I had never seen them wet. Not in the summer. Not on the morning Astrid had come into our chambers with the cup. Not in any tale told about him. I knew your voice, he said. I have been writing to it for 9 months. I knew it last night. I knew it in the corridor. He stopped. He shook his head. I did not let myself know. It was the most honest sentence I had ever heard him say. I knelt down in front of him with Bran in my arms, on the stones of the great hall, and I put our son into his hands. He took him the way a man takes something he has been preparing to lose forever, and is now being asked to keep. He did not weep where the court could see. He held our son, and he looked at me over our son's head, and he said quietly, only to me, Mirror, mirror. I let myself, finally, lean my forehead against his. The kiss was nothing, a breath, less than a breath, the press of his mouth to my temple, the way a man seals a vow he cannot speak aloud. And what broke open inside me had nothing to do with the kiss, and everything to do with the fact that I had come home, in front of a court that had buried me, and the man who had been writing me letters every night had not, in the end, needed proof. He had needed only my voice. Astrid Voss was at the back of the hall. I had not seen her come in. She had come in to watch a kitchen woman be humiliated, and she had walked into the moment of her own undoing. And Roderick, without taking his eyes off our son, said one word. Hold her. 2 of his warriors had already moved. They had moved before he spoke. They had been his men in the summer when I was Luna, and they were his men now. And Astrid Voss did not run, because running would have made it worse, and she stood very still with her chin up, while they took her by the arms. Roderick looked at her then. The look on his face was not a king's look. It was a wolf's. You will speak, he said, in the council chamber, in front of the High Witch, every word of what you did. You will name the physician. You will name your brother. You will name every hand that took coin from yours. And when you are finished, you will be sent north of the hollow, beyond the binding stones, and your name will be struck from the rolls of every house that ever sheltered you. And if any wolf of my pack ever speaks your name again in my hearing, I will take their tongue for it. She did not answer. There was nothing to answer. They took her out through the council door, and the hall stayed quiet for a long moment. And then a single warrior at the long table, Bjorn, who had been Roderick's second since they were boys, stood up and lifted his cup and said, in a voice that shook only at the very end, To the Luna and the Heir. The hall stood, the whole hall. I have never, in all my life, before or since, heard a sound like the sound of a great hall of wolves standing for me with their cups raised. And I have never, in all my life, before or since, watched a king put his face into the hair of his son and weep silently in front of his court, because he had been given back the thing he had been writing letters to for 9 months. 3 months later, the south wing was finished. Roderick had built it for me in the first weeks of our marriage and never told me. I had thought it was for a guest wing, in the summer when I was 21 and easy to surprise. After I was gone, he had finished it anyway. The windows faced east. The library at the end of the corridor had my favourite books on the lower shelves, where I could reach them without standing on the rolling ladder I had always pretended to like. The chair at the long table was still there, the wolf and moon at the crest, the high back. He did not have it removed when I came home. He had it polished and he had it set, and on the first night I sat in it, he reached across, without looking, and put his hand on mine. And the court, which had been watching the empty chair for 9 months and was now watching the chair filled, let out a breath together that I do not think any of them noticed they were holding. Bran sleeps on my shoulder as I tell you this. The Hollow Witch sent a letter at midwinter. Did the glamour break clean, she had asked, and I had written back, it broke the way a thing breaks when it has done its work. She had sent another letter a month later. Tell the child his mother was clever, she wrote. That is the only thing worth telling a son. I tell him. He does not understand yet. He will. Roderick does not write letters to an empty chair anymore. He writes them to me, in the south wing, on the nights when the council runs late and he comes in after I have gone to sleep. And he leaves them on the pillow next to mine, and I read them in the morning while the sun comes up over the east windows, and the chair beside the throne is no longer empty, and the man who did not say it in the summer when I was 21 has, in the end, learned to write it down. Tell me, did you see the chair before he did? Did you know what it meant when she walked into the hall and said, "Look at me"? Where are you listening from tonight? And what was the moment that made you stay? I want to know. I am still working out what the whole of it meant, and the comments are how I learn. If you want her side of the story, and there is more of it, there is always more of it, stay with me. Subscribe so the next one finds you. I will be here. I have a chair now. I am not getting up.